When a rigid, monolithic structure reaches its breaking point, it fragments into a distributed network of autonomous nodes. This shift is reshaping digital asset management. Traditional commercial banking relies on a highly centralized ledger. A single corporate entity takes on unified liability for all user deposits, creating a single point of structural failure. Contrast this. On the left, the single central node of traditional fiat banking. On the right, the NeoBank multi-node ecosystem, executing cross-market arbitrage. It rejects fixed interest rates, instead relying on floating, performance-based yields driven by real-time market activity. To understand the risk architecture of this ecosystem, we have to mechanically trace the life cycle of a single minimum deposit from entry to exit. That life cycle moves through three distinct phases: the initial capital inflow, a forced algorithmic splitting of the assets, and a strictly capped outflow. Nathing these phases exposes the specific mathematical constraints and offshore legal barriers that the platform uses to insulate itself against total ecosystem collapse. The risk management begins with geographical isolation. While NeoBank's corporate leadership operates out of Vilnius, Lithuania, its legal foundation is positioned thousands of miles away. Looking at this map, we locate the island of Anjouan within the Union of Comoros. This specific offshore jurisdiction serves as the regulatory host for the platform's legal architecture. By utilizing this jurisdiction, the platform implements a strategy of strict corporate compartmentalization, dividing its operations to isolate financial liability. This organizational chart breaks down that legal ecosystem into 5 distinct corporate entities. At the core is NeoBank Ltd, holding an international banking license to oversee the central banking platform and overall asset management. A separate entity, ARB Insurance Fund Limited, is legally isolated to coordinate the return fund, handling risk hedging and capital protection. Network marketing and bonus distributions are shifted entirely to a third company, MLM Matrix Limited. Finally, actual market execution is partitioned to Arbitrage Core Limited for order book trading and ARB Exchange Limited for liquidity routing. Compartmentalizing these specific functions into offshore legal silos ensures that a catastrophic failure in the high-risk trading or marketing arms cannot legally compromise the core banking and insurance ledgers. With the legal perimeter established, we turn to the capital inflow mechanism, which is driven entirely by MLM Matrix Limited. The compensation model incentivizing this inflow operates in 2 tiers. The first is a 5% direct reward on the investment volume of any personally sponsored partner. The second tier is a 5% binary reward generated across the builder's entire network structure. This binary tree visualizes the network structure, distributing rewards across 7 descending grades. To unlock this income, users must meet a strict qualification rule known as Invite to, Teach to, sponsoring 2 active partners, 1 left and 1 right. The platform enforces anti-fraud protocols to protect this structure, issuing strict bans on multi-accounting, blocking self-refirms, and prohibiting fake relative accounts. Because of the corporate compartmentalization, an investor's rights are legally separated. If a user violates the matrix rules and is terminated from the marketing program, they do not forfeit their underlying investment contracts held with NeoBank Limited. The rigorous qualification rules of the binary matrix systematically force user-driven, self-replicating capital inflow. This constant liquidity generation is required to sustain the platform's baseline operational volume. Once a baseline capital injection, as low as 10 USDT, enters the ecosystem, it hits the central NeoBank Ltd ledger. At this stage, the platform overrides user preference. The system mandates an automated internal portfolio diversification for every deposit. This animation illustrates the algorithm in practice. 100% of the deposited capital is rigidly split into 3 identical 33.33% fractions. The first fraction is routed to ARB Exchange Limited, providing the capital necessary to execute decentralized cross-market liquidity routing. The second fraction flows to Arbitrage Core Limited, funding computational order book trading to capture price discrepancies across Tier 1 exchanges. The final fraction is sent to the crypto fund, serving as a localized vault for long-term institutional holding and asset generation. By dividing the capital, the system fuels an automated arbitrage mechanism that executes high-velocity microtransactions across highly varied exchange environments simultaneously. Mathematically forcing every deposit into a rigid three-way split structurally decentralizes the risk. If one strategy underperforms, the capital loss is contained, protecting the viability of the other two branches. With capital deployed, the system transitions to the outflow phase, focusing on the actual yield generated by the three active products. Returns are strictly floating based on daily performance. Stablecoins like USDT average 0.42% daily, while volatile assets like Bitcoin average 0.59%. Any residual principal assets within that contract are permanently absorbed by NeoBank. Users have a top-up capability. Adding new capital to an active contract increases the base amount, which proportionally recalculates and raises the absolute payout ceiling. The system also enforces a mandatory reinvestment rule. If new banking products are introduced, active balances that do not meet the minimum participation threshold are automatically reserved and forced into the new product. In this diagram, we see a separate reserve silo, isolated from the main product nodes. This is the return fund, managed by Arb Insurance Fund Limited, acting as the final layer of protection against insolvency. Insurance distributions are heavily gated. If a product experiences a technical failure, the fund only covers up to 33%, capping user payouts at an absolute 300% limit and restricting insurance payouts to a 90-day drip, mathematically prevents sudden liquidity runs. The system sacrifices infinite user profitability to prioritize the sheer survival of the ecosystem. Stepping back from the granular mechanics, the macro architecture of the platform reveals its true function. This flowchart maps a heavily regulated, closed-loop machine. The binary matrix forces capital inflow, the one-third rule splits it to distribute risk, and the contract target halts outflow. Wrapping around this flow are the 5 Comoras entities, acting as an external liability barrier. NeoBank does not operate under the traditional commercial banking framework. It functions as a mathematically constrained arbitrage engine. By isolating liability in offshore legal silos, automating forced risk diversification, and strictly throttling capital outflow, the architecture enforces structural limits designed to endure the volatility of digital assets.